And good morning once again, my brothers and sisters. Here we are, another Living Hope Today study. Today we find ourselves in Deuteronomy chapter 22. I want to welcome you to this study and just remind you that Moses in the book of Deuteronomy has been telling the people how to live once they gain the promised land. There's been a lot of civil law discussion. There's been discussion about how to love God. Well, today we're talking about how to love your neighbor, but there's some very common sense things in this chapter, but there are also some things that may surprise you. Let's look at it together. When you get to 22:1, it says, if you see your brother's ox or sheep straying, do not ignore it, but be sure to take it back to him. So what's the topic here? Well, that's not too hard to figure out. It's about your neighbor's livestock, right? What happens if they get out of the fence, or there's probably no fence at this stage in their development? What happens if they just wander off? And there one day you wake up and there's a strange sheep out there in your pasture. What should you do? Well, don't ignore it. Take it back to your neighbor. Love your brother. Love your neighbor. If the brother does not live near you, or if you don't know who he is, take it home with you and keep it until he comes looking for it. And then what? Then give it back to him. In other words, it's not this whole idea of finders keepers, right? I found out, so it's mine? No. I'm going to love my neighbor enough to have the integrity to say, this doesn't belong to me. I'll take care of this animal until my neighbor shows up. And once he does, I'll hand it back to him. Simple, basic courtesy. Loving your neighbor. All right? Do the same if you find your brother's donkey or his cloak or anything he loses. Don't ignore it. All right? So this admonition applies to more than just livestock. Any kind of property. You find something that doesn't belong to you, you don't keep it. You find out who owns it and you give it back. If you see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen on the road, don't ignore it. What? Help him. Help him get it to its feet. In other words, don't go walking past somebody in distress if you know how to help them in that moment. Now, watch this. This is a very unique verse to the Old Testament, and about all of Scripture, actually. A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing. For the Lord your God detests anyone who does this. Now, think about clothing in the ancient world. Men wore tunics, women wore dresses or long coverings. They look sort of similar, but what Scripture is pointing out to us is the distinctions made between male and female need to stay distinct. Cross-dressing is out, which basically rules out all kinds of transvestite tendencies, right? We're not going to do that. God says keep the distinctions between the genders distinct. No crossing over. And that's it. Just that one little verse. Now watch. If you come across a bird's nest beside the road, either in a tree or on the ground, and the mother is sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Okay, so now we're talking about food. Watch this. You may take the young, in other words, the eggs, but be sure to let the mother go so that it may go well with you and you may have a long life. What's he talking about? Don't destroy your food source. If you're going to eat the eggs, okay, but don't eat the mother too. Let the mother live. Why? Because then you're going to have your food source intact to help you survive. You're going to live. It's going to be good. Now we move to housing. When you build a new house, make a parapet around your roof so that you may not bring the guilt of bloodshed on your house if someone falls from the roof. So in the old days, they had roofs that were basically flat, There was usually a stairway that was on the outside of the building. You would climb up that stairway. You would spend time on the roof. A lot of nights, were hot. The day was really hot, but the night would cool off. You could go up to your roof. It was sort of like a patio. You could sit down up there and enjoy the cool of the evening. Well, here we see you need to anticipate the fact that somebody could fall off and get badly injured or worse. So build a parapet. It's like a little wall around the outside of your patio on your roof. Why? So that falling off the roof would not be easy. You couldn't just trip and do it. You'd have to climb the wall to go fall off the roof. Look how it says it, though. You may not bring the guilt of bloodshed on your house. In other words, you're responsible for the safety of your guests insofar as providing a way to prevent them from experiencing injury while they are on your property. Now, they might still, maybe they're inebriated and they fall off the roof anyway. Well, God's not going to hold you accountable for their bloodshed as long as you've taken precautionary measures to try to prevent it. All right. Do not plant two kinds of seed in your vineyard. If you do, not only the crops you plant, but also the fruit of the vineyard will be defiled. This might be talking about cross-pollination. This might be talking, I think it's Leviticus 19 that talked about that, if you remember. God doesn't want this mixed. Why not? Because you're going to ruin both crops if you do it. All right? Keep the crops distinct. Again, what are we talking about? Food. We're back to food. Don't plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. What's that about? Well, one's obviously stronger than the other. Both in temperament, they're probably going to have a hard time working together if you know those animals very well. But God's just telling them, use common sense. Come on. Yoke the animals that are of equal strength and that have the temperament to actually pull the plow, right? A donkey's probably not going to be able to do that with an ox. God says, pay attention to what you do and how you do it. Now, here's another very unique verse in the Old Testament. Do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. All right, what's that about? Well, there's speculation about this verse. Most of the speculation revolves around pagan practices, that the neighbors that worship pagan gods might have made a practice of this, and therefore God brings it up as a thing to avoid so that we're not copying that paganism in any way. But we're not really able to park on that because it really doesn't explain it any further than just don't mix these fabrics together. Okay, it says make tassels on the four corners of the cloak you wear. You remember that's to help you remember what God has commanded. We saw that earlier. If a man takes a wife, okay, here we go. If a man takes a wife and after lying with her, he dislikes her. Okay, so there's the hypothetical situation presented in verse 13. How does the man respond after lying with his wife? Well, number one, he dislikes her. Okay, what happens number two? He slanders her. Okay, what does that mean? He's talking trash about her. He's calling her names and making sure everybody understands that she's not a good person. And he slanders her. He gives her a bad name. How does he do that? Well, he says, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I did not find proof of her virginity. So now he's slandering her character and her integrity as he decides he doesn't like her. Okay, then the girl's father and mother shall bring proof that she was a virgin to the town elders at the gate. What's that proof? Well, we're not really told, but apparently there was a standard back in the day where they could somehow analyze these things and understand that there was no truth to the claim that this girl wasn't a virgin. So the girl's father will say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man. In other words, we acted in good faith, but he dislikes her. Now he has slandered her, and he said, I did not find your daughter to be a virgin, but here's the proof of my daughter's virginity. So the claim is untrue. The man's just disliking her enough to smear her integrity. Well, then her parents shall display the cloth before the elders of the town, and the elders shall take the man and punish him. We're not told what that is. Well, we kind of are. Look at the next verse. The punishment first is financial. They shall fine him 100 shekels of silver. By scholarly debate, that probably equals out to about 4.5 pounds of silver, 100 shekels of silver, and give them to the girl's father, because this man has given an Israelite virgin a bad name. She shall, watch this. She shall continue to be his wife. He must not divorce her as long as he lives. So, because you dislike her, because you slander her, does not override the marriage. Right? Even though you've been proven to slander her without facts, it's been a baseless accusation. You are not allowed to nullify the marriage over that. You stay married to her as long as you live. That's what we're told. If, however, the charge is true, okay, what was the charge? That she wasn't a virgin and no proof of the girl's virginity can be found. So here comes the second hypothetical situation. She shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of the town shall stone her to death. In other words, lying about that and getting caught is a capital offense. She has done a disgraceful thing in Israel by being promiscuous while still in her father's house. All right, you're not a virgin, so what happens? You end up losing your life over it. And God says, again, we've seen this line over and over, you must purge the evil from among you. All right, God has a standard, especially He has very strict standards for our sexual behavior. And in the community, as Israel prepares to enter the promised land, they're told, keep the standard. Under capital offense punishment, keep the standard. You can't let evil coexist. You've got to get rid of it. If a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, what do you call that? That's adultery. All right? And in our day and age, what's the punishment for adultery? Wow, we're just animals. We should do whatever our instincts require of us whenever we feel like doing it. That's what our culture says. What does God say? If a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. So another capital punishment situation for adultery. You must purge the evil from Israel. God views adultery as absolute evil, and he wants to keep his community from practicing that. If a man happens to meet in a town a virgin pledged to be married. Now, consider another hypothetical. Here we have a woman who's already engaged, and back in the day, when you were pledged to be married, you might as well have been married. They didn't actually perform the ceremony during the engagement, but the bond of the promise was complete. Okay? Well, here comes some guy. He sees a woman, and she's already pledged to be married to some other guy, and he sleeps with her. Now, this doesn't imply force. This implies a willingness on both parties' side, okay? What happens? You shall take both of them to the gate of the town and stone them to death. Wow. The girl, because she was in a town and did not scream for help, now that implies force. Verse 23 didn't really have that implication. All right? If it is force, then she's required to scream for help, to try to stop the event. And the man, because he violated another man's wife. All right? And what does Scripture tell us again? You must purge the evil from among you. Okay? These are the rules the Israelite community is to follow. And now we go one step further. But if, out in the country, a man happens to meet a girl, pledged to be married, okay, she's still committed to somebody else, only this time we're told there is force, he rapes her. Only the man who has done this shall die. Why? Well, because the girl couldn't have received help because she was isolated. Do nothing to the girl. She's committed no sin deserving death. This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders his neighbor, for the man found the girl out in the country, and though the betrothed girl screamed, there was no one to rescue her. That's the point of the screaming, right? To bring help. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and again, what do we see? Force again. And he rapes her, and they're discovered. What happens in that case? He shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the girl, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. Again, this seems kind of weird to Western ears, to our culture. I know it's easy to put yourself in the place of this woman who got raped, and now she's required to be married to this man that raped her. It seems like it's a very harsh situation, but in the ancient world, that is how things worked. Women were not valued in the sense of belonging to themselves. They were either under the authority of their father or under the authority of their husband. And this is how it plays out in that kind of community. A man is not to marry his father's wife. All right? He must not dishonor his father's bed. Remember Absalom as you think of that. So, what are we supposed to do? Well, we love our neighbors, and that was demonstrated earlier in the chapter. And then all these hypothetical situations regarding sleeping together, sexual purity, come up in the end of chapter 22. Again, God requires, desires, commands sexual purity in our lives. We might not be used to the customs of the Old Testament, but nonetheless, the moral thread is still intact, that we live our lives in purity before Him. God bless you, church. Serve Him well today.
Who is it who for sinners shed His blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus. But do you know who He is? He's the image of the invisible God, and He's the brightness of His glory, the first, the last, the future, the past,